Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Model Kit Review. In today's fun model kit review video, we'll be looking at the HobbyBoss 1/48 scale FM-2 Wildcat. This is HobbyBoss kit number 80330. This kit was originally released in 2007. In this video, we'll take a look at what comes in the box. We will go through the kit instructions, and we'll talk about any potential problem areas to watch out for during the construction phase of the build. We'll talk about the surface detailing on the exterior of the kit, and we'll also talk about the fit of the major parts. We'll look at the detail found on the smaller parts in the kit that make up the landing gear and the interior. We'll go through the color and marking guides and talk about the marking options that come in the kit, as well as the quality and performance of the decals themselves. We'll look at the clear parts on the kit, and we'll talk about the clarity and the fit of those. I'll mention any aftermarket parts that I plan to use during this build. And we'll also talk about how this kit compares to the competition from other manufacturers. If you like in-depth model kit reviews and model building technique videos, please consider becoming a member. Depending on the level of membership, members get perks like early access to new videos, bonus content, etc. Your support is very much appreciated, and it will help me to continue to make great model making content on this channel. A brief history of the FM-2 Wildcat. The FM-2 Wildcat was designed and prototyped by Grumman Aircraft. More than 4,000 were built by the Eastern Aircraft Division of the General Motors Company between 1943 and 1945. These aircraft incorporated a lighter airframe and more powerful engine. This meant there were physical design differences between the F4F and the FM-2. The engine in the FM-2 was the 1,350 horsepower Wright R1820-56 radial engine. The FM-2 had a taller vertical tail for stability to counter the increased torque of the engine. Armament consisted of 4 50 caliber machine guns, and it had 2 external racks that could carry either bombs or fuel tanks. It could also be armed with air-to-ground rockets. These aircraft were primarily operated from escort carriers to support ground operations in the Pacific Theater of Operations. These same aircraft were teamed with Grumman Avengers and used in anti-sub operations in the Atlantic against U-boats. Before we get into the instructions on this kit, one thing is very evident when you start looking at the parts breakdown of this kit. It's obvious that HobbyBoss spent a lot of time researching the Tamiya F4F Wildcat when they designed this kit. Looking at the instructions, in step 1, we are building up the cockpit interior. The detail on the small parts here looks excellent, except for the rather basic pilot seat. I plan on replacing the stock seat with a True Details resin replacement seat that is shown in this photograph. The second part of step 1 has us installing the cockpit interior into the lower fuselage tub. We're also building the engine and forward firewall detail. The detailing on all of these parts looks very nice. My only caution here is that you'll need to carefully clean up all of these small parts as you work on this assembly. Step 2 is broken down into 3 sections. In the first part of step 2, we are mounting the machine guns in the lower wing halves, and then we're attaching the upper wing halves to those. I've glued the machine guns in place, and the upper and lower wing halves fit very nicely together. In the second part of step 2, we're adding the tail hook and tail wheel to the aircraft, and then we're closing up the fuselage halves and adding the lower fuselage tub. Just a quick note here, part F33, and that's the tail wheel, is shown located in the wrong position, but fitting this part should be very obvious. There is a hole for the tail wheel, and that's where you want to mount it. I don't anticipate any major problems with this step of construction, but you will need to take time dry fitting these parts together if you want to get a filler-free assembly. In the third part of step 2, we are adding the wings to the fuselage, we're adding the engine assembly and the engine cowl, as well as the elevators and the rudder to the kit. This kit has some very noticeable errors on it. Almost all of the errors deal with parts that are in this assembly, and so I'm going to go over the fit of these parts first, and then I'll get into the errors and possible ways to correct them. Looking at the fit of the wings to the fuselage, once again, you'll need to spend a little bit of time here tweaking the fit. It also seems that the wings are a little bit longer front to back than the wing fillets on the fuselage, and I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to deal with this yet. Fitting the elevators to the aircraft, I think I'll be able to get a pretty decent fit, but there is a little bit of a gap towards the forward edge of the elevators. The engine cowl itself has some major inaccuracies, the most prominent of which is the two intakes that are molded to the forward lip. These are from an F4F. These are not on the FM-2. Thankfully, this is an easy problem to rectify. It took me about 5 minutes with a razor blade to carefully cut these off of the kit. The next known issue with this kit is the oversized indentation for the exhaust outlet on the forward fuselage halves. In this picture, you can see that the indentation should end forward of the wing, and it should be much smaller from top to bottom as well. You can either choose to ignore this flaw or to try to correct it. The next flaw on this kit that we'll talk about is the height of the rudder. I have the rudder shown against a 1/48 scale representation of the FM4, and you can see the FM4 tail is much taller and more squared off than the kit part. This problem is a little bit harder to deal with in that you'd have to add and shape material to correct it. Moving on, in step 3, we're building the main landing gear assembly. We're also building the right fuel tank. Looking at the breakdown of these parts, it's obvious once again that HobbyBoss has looked at the Tamiya kit. You'll just need to be careful with the small parts cleanup in this step of construction. In step 4, we're adding the main gear assembly to the kit. We're also adding the fuel tanks to the kit and some other bits. I don't anticipate any problems with this step of construction. In step 5, we're adding the prop to the kit. We're also adding the clear parts and the antenna to the kit. This brings us to another accuracy issue with this kit. There were 2 styles of props that were available for the FM2, and it looks like HobbyBoss combined the prop hub for one style of prop with the prop blades for a different style of prop. For the prop with the paddle blades, the center of the prop should look more like the prop in this photo. Looking at the clear parts, these look to be relatively clear. They have decent framing on them. They're relatively thin. My only concern here is that the forward section does not sit down easily, and therefore it doesn't line up quite with the sliding section of the canopy. You'll definitely need to do some dry fitting to get these parts to look right on the finished kit. Looking at the color and marking guides, there are 2 marking options included with this kit. The first one is for an FM2 of VC-10 from the USS Gambier Bay in October of 1944. The second marking option is for an FM2 of VC-36 that flew from the USS Core. This one has the North Atlantic scheme. I would highly recommend doing a little bit of your own research and finding some good photographs of the aircraft that are represented in these color schemes to ensure that the color callouts match up to the actual aircraft depicted. Looking at the decals themselves, these appear to be opaque. They look to be in register. I have used HobbyBoss decals before without any issues, and I don't anticipate any major problems with these. I came across a nice set of super scale decals for the FM2, and I'll probably go with one of these color schemes for the aircraft that I build. Looking at the surface detail on the exterior of the kit, it is represented by finely engraved panel lines and finely engraved rivets. The rivets themselves are a little bit overscale, but I think these should look fine, especially under the dark navy blue paint. As I've gone over as we went through the instructions, the fit of the major parts is going to need a little bit of tweaking if you want to get a filler-free build. I think that's probably possible if you take your time and dry fit everything very carefully. In summary, while the execution of the individual parts in this kit is actually pretty nice, I think the accuracy errors when it comes to the front engine cowl and the exhaust openings and the rudder for this kit really take away from what could be a nice build. If you want an accurate FM2, you will definitely have to modify several of the kit parts, including the fuselage halves, and I think that's more work than a lot of modelers really want to do on a kit. When we look at the competition, fortunately for modelers, Eduard has recently come out with an FM2 Wildcat kit. That kit is definitely the definitive FM2 Wildcat. It's more accurate. It has none of the accuracy issues that this kit does, and due to its more precise fit, I think it will actually assemble quicker and easier than this HobbyBoss kit will. Additionally, the Eduard kit has much better color callouts. It has many more marking options included with the kit. It has better researched marking options, and I think the Eduard kit is worth the difference in price over this HobbyBoss offering. Well, I'd love to know what you guys think. If any of you out there have built the FM2 from HobbyBoss, please feel free to comment in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, model on.